back to That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, my next guest may have the most unique and compelling story of anybody we have featured on this show. He is originally from the East Coast. He grew up in the New Jersey area, but now considers himself a Montana mountain man. Well, I don't know if he's a mountain man or not, but anyway, he moved west, went west a while ago, but he's penned a most interestingly titled Stop the Tall Man and Save the Tiger memoir. And it's all about a journey that I think many will find quite interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and please welcome Peter Young.
Kevin,
Hello, Peter.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. And you're a TV guy. Out west, people would know you from some of your work with sports and some of the TV stuff that you've done. Why, at this stage of life, did you feel it was necessary to tell this story?
Wow, great question. Haven't had that one. Well, it all kind of came to a head about 5-6 years ago when my wife left me. And so what happened was I went along to get along with my wife for almost 20 years and getting along with Uncle Robert, who was not related at all, but he was the little cult leader of our tiny little religious cult, which at the time I didn't realize it. I knew he was weird and odd. He had some crazy beliefs. But, once she left me, they agreed that I was the devil and a Satan and a liar and all other kinds of horrible things. They taught my kids to hate me. Friends and family really finally rallied around me when I let them know what was going on because I had kept it secret for so long. And so now with eyes to see and ears to hear, the Lord has helped me realize that, I was in a cult. I was in a tiny little religious cult, was brainwashed, but thankfully I've recovered. And it was a wild ride.
A lot of my listeners may be very skeptical about cults and religion in general, and even the idea of a God. I certainly do believe that there is one. But let's talk about this story. Where does it begin?
Well, it begins in 1996. When I met my future wife, Paige, that's what I call her in the book, and she had had a fascinating dream right before she met me, so that's the title of the book. And the dream was so important, she referenced it many years later in her testimony. She's in a house with a boyfriend at the time, and there's a tiger on the loose, and if it finds her, it's going to kill her. Then the door opens, and a tall man comes in. She can't see the tall man's face, but he's there to get rid of the tiger. She hides, the boyfriend disappears, tall man gets rid of the tiger. Now, your listeners can't tell, but I'm 6'5". And Uncle Robert, who tried to claim that he was the tall man, is a 5'6" guy from Syria. Again, not related to anybody. So he writes this crazy long letter, sends it to Paige, convinces her she's not a Christian, turns the dream in the letter upside down on its head. And then she spends the better part of our marriage trying to stop me, the tall man, from exposing this Uncle Robert, because I believe the Lord gave her that dream as a warning. This guy in your life that you revere and honor is not who he thinks he is. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing. And that right there is pretty much the synopsis of our 20-year marriage.
Take us through some of the critical moments as you moved from place to place. You were raised a Christian.
Yes.
And you've already referenced the Lord a few times in this discussion. Were you swept up into the little Syrian man's narrative? Were you a believer?
So the important point, Kevin, is that cult leaders don't just start off by spouting lies and nonsense. They sound really good at first. They sound like they have the truth, and oftentimes they do. For instance, Uncle Robert read to us from the Bible. The analogy I give is if you mishit a golf ball by like 1/8 of an inch, okay, 100 yards down the fairway, it's way off to the left or way off to the right. Well, 5-10 years down the road of Uncle Robert reading the Bible, and then he'd give it his little perverse spin, you're way off from what the true gospel means. For instance, he thought that the Jews were out to control the world and try and control all Christians. He felt that casinos were the true places of worship and not the churches that people go to on Sunday. He thought in order to teach children discipline, you had to crush them, crush the will of the child, rather than, yes, spare the rod, spoil the child, but the rod of correction, not to crush the child. And I could go on and on and on. And this happened very slowly and subtly over many years, So finally, I was the one who asked all the questions. And I kept getting in trouble for asking too many questions. And I finally caved and allowed him to, quote unquote, save me, which I knew was fraudulent and unnecessary. But that's what he did with everybody, all the adults in our tiny little cult. You weren't saved unless you went through him first.
So there were additional, what we would claim, extra biblical steps that had to be taken in order to achieve salvation.
Correct. The salvation message, as you know, is quite simple. It's a free gift. You can't earn it, and you don't need anyone else's approval. But we had to go through him and his steps first. Before then, he would say, well, now you're ready to be saved. And that's just unbiblical. It's wicked.
You know, it's interesting. The recent phenomenon of the Duggar family's two daughters speaking up and being willing to be interviewed for the new short series that deals with Bill Gothard and the institutes that he would teach sound remarkably similar to, not in substance, but in style, as to what you are describing of this Uncle Robert. And I'm curious, are there more people caught up in some of these cult-like activities than even realize it?
Well, I would think so. Stephen Hassan wrote a great book that really helped me in my recovery. It's called Combating Cult Mind Control. So cults come in all shapes and sizes, right? They all look very different. Now, we didn't look like a cult, but at its foundation, at its core, a cult is
what was your little group referred to as? Did Robert refer to it as a church? Was it a small group gathering? How would he have classified it?
You know, we didn't have a name. You won't find anything on them on the internet. We would have our little conferences every year. So we would have conferences in northern Idaho. We'd go listen to him. And it was tiny. At its most, maybe 12 to 15 people. Just my family, and then my in-laws, then him and his wife, and one or two other guys. That was it. And my kids. Very small.
Was the purpose from the outset, do you think, to separate your wife from you? Why was she so susceptible to it, and it took you dragging and screaming to become part of it?
Yeah, great question. So you have to picture Uncle Robert, this little short 5'6" guy, bald, bulbous nose, olive complexion. He never had a job that I knew of, was always reliant on our tithes. So we sent him tithe money. And, you know, he had no really career accomplishment or achievement. And my former wife was tall, beautiful, 2 master's degrees. So with her in his fold, in his flock, he had instant cachet. So she was probably his most important convert. And here I am, I marry into all this little craziness, and I'm always asking questions. What do you mean the Jews are out to control the world? You know, what do you mean during 9/11, 80,000 people died? What do you mean Truman and President Roosevelt were Jews? And I kept asking these questions, and Paige and my in-laws bought everything hook, line, and sinker. So as I asked all these questions, eventually I was probably seen as a threat.
Wow. We're speaking with Peter Young, who's the author of the memoir called Stop the Tall Man, Save the Tiger. He just described where the title came from in the dream. And he has some pretty interesting endorsements from this. So in the New York area, we've heard about the Nixon cult and what was happening with some of those. But some of the survivors from there have endorsed this. And you can find it at your favorite place to buy books. We're coming right back from New York. Don't go away.
Ready or not, he'll be right back. That Kevin